Welcome to this session of our virtual health conference, our 3-day extravaganza. So this conference is all about admissions to medical school, but you know what? This also applies to other things too. Admissions, like in other words, the things that we're going to be talking about applying to med school and whatnot, kind of cover the same things of applying to other areas, right? So this will have valuable information for you, regardless of where you're going and what you are considering. And just so you know, the conference is being recorded, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but I know that so the conferences are being transcripted, right? And eventually you could get a copy of the hour session, and supposedly those will be ready by the end of May. And so I think you would just email the transfer center, the IVC transfer center, and request, which session you would like to have the recording of. We've muted all of you. And so please use the chat window if you have any questions. And so I'll be monitoring the chat window. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm Diana Hurlbut, duh. So I'm known as Dr. D at IVC campus here, and I teach anatomy and physiology and microbiome, all the pre-health things. I also teach in the bio majors line for the pre-med students. Okay, and pre-dental and pre-vet, all that. So welcome to our session. I'm going to go around the room here just to introduce our other three panelists, and then we'll start in with some questions. We have I have a whole list of questions here to ask our panelists, and hopefully that will answer some of your concerns. But of course, use that chat window. All right, Ms. Nunez, why don't you go first, please?
Sure, I'll break the ice. My name's Crystal Nunez. I am an admissions counselor at Touro University, California, specifically for the College of Osteopathic Medicine. I have my master's in higher education with an emphasis in student affairs, and it's a pleasure to answer some questions today and maybe introduce you guys to our DO school.
All right, and could you please, all of you, could you please tell us where your schools are located?
Oh, yeah. So we're located in Northern California, more the Bay Area, Vallejo, specifically Mare Island.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Fulbright.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Fulbright. I'm the manager of admissions and student affairs at the UCR School of Medicine. I've been with the university for about 8 or 9 years, I think, since 2014. So some time. Where are we located? We are located in Riverside, California, which is about, 30 or 45 minutes outside of Irvine in Riverside County. So relatively close, I believe, to most folks on the call.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Cortez.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Rufina Cortez from Cedru University, CDU. We are admitting our inaugural class this July for our 4-year medical program, and we're located in the Willowbrook area in South LA.
All right, wonderful, thank you. All right, so here's my first question for the three of you. How do you evaluate a candidate's application for medical school, and what qualities are you looking for in an ideal candidate? And again, we'll just go with Ms. Nunez, then Ms. Fulbright, and then Dr. Cortez. We'll just keep going in that order. Okay.
Okay, so in regards to the application, our application process is kind of broken up into 2 phases, and our admission committee sets a bar, and then they pull applicants to be interviewed from that bar. An ideal candidate will not just meet the minimum requirements, but slightly above it, only because our student matriculation average CAT scoring GPA is higher than the minimum requirement. But it is broken up in 2 phases. And the first phase is to meet the minimum, and then you'd be invited to fill out the secondary application.
What is the minimum?
So the minimum MCAT score is 500, and then we require minimum GPA of 3.0 for cumulative and science GPA. And then, of course, letter of recommendations and prerequisites.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fulbright.
Yes, in terms of how UCR reviews applications submitted to us, we utilize the holistic review process, meaning that we take into consideration all aspects of an applicant when reviewing files. So there's kind of three main categories that UCR really focuses on. The first category I would say is academics. So we take into consideration an applicant's MCAT score, as well as their science GPA. The second category would be community service experience or activities that an applicant has achieved. UCR is really big on serving or recruiting students to work with underserved communities. Riverside County in itself is an underserved community, so we're really looking for students to work and have a desire to practice in an area like Riverside County. And then I would say probably the third category or criteria that we look at is clinical experience. So we really want to make sure that students have kind of done their due diligence in terms of learning what it takes to be a physician. And so we're really looking for people who have gotten direct hands-on patient care experience. So common things that we see, maybe students volunteer at a free clinic, kind of triaging patients. They may, the Cope Health Scholar program is very popular kind of locally, where students kind of shadow physicians and get experience, I think, on all the different wards of a hospital. What's another common one? Oh, scribing. We see that commonly within an emergency department. So those are kind of the three main things that we focus on at UCR. And like I said, really just making sure that we consider the applicant as a whole, taking into consideration any hardships they've gone through, etc.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Cortez.
Yes, thank you. Yes, for us, very similarly, we're looking, excuse me, we take it, we're looking at it holistically. So we do take into account your MCAT scores, of course, your science GPA, your letters of recommendation are very important. And we do check the application so that there could be coherence. So I always tell students the show and tell. Not only list it, but also show us how you, well, don't only write it, don't put it, whatever you write in your personal statement, we look for your experience and see if it matches. If you say you're really committed to underserved communities, which is one of our staples at CDU as well, we want students who are really committed to the community, who want to work in underrepresented areas. So we're going to be looking at those factors in your application. If you have volunteer for 1 hour versus 100 or 200 hours in an area, that tells us a lot. Very similarly for us too, we're looking for students who have clinical experience, and we understand sometimes students cannot always volunteer, they need to work, but also some of the popular ones, whether volunteer or paid, scribe, as was mentioned already before, being a scribe, pharmacy tech, EMT is a very popular one, a medical assistant, and clinical research coordinator position. It could also be outreach you do in your own communities. CDU, it's right in the center, right in the middle of the community. We have MLK Hospital across the street, and we are in South LA, right literally in the middle. There's houses around in the neighborhood. I mean, we are there walking distance from everything. So we're looking for matching students who bring that to the table for a fit. So as you're considering different programs, there's not a right or wrong, but there's a good fit for you as a student, and there's a good fit for us as a prospective admitted medical student. So So do your homework in that and find out what you want to do, what area you want to be in. We provide different opportunities for students to engage in the community. So again, we're looking for that. Your letters of recommendation are very important. We like to see the correlation. If you say you're really committed to underserved communities, but none of your letters address that, in terms of your letters of recommendation, that weighs heavily. For our specific campus as well, we do like to see minimum of one letter coming from an MD, and again, showing that you have some experience. In some cases, you cannot get that, but if possible, do get those. Make sure that when you ask for letters of recommendation, that you ask your recommenders if they can write a strong letter for you. We've read a few where the recommender will say, this student is not ready for medical school yet, maybe in a year or two. Tell them about your post-bac opportunities. I'm sure the student was not expecting for that letter writer to do that. And if we go to their application, we see that maybe they chatted with them for 4 hours. So really do your own homework so that you can represent yourself as best as you can. But going back and wrapping this question, yes, we take a holistic approach. We really look at everything, and we don't have a minimum GPA or MCAT score, but we do want students, as my other two colleagues have mentioned, we want students that go beyond the minimum requirements. And this is our first class. We'll have more numbers after this session, but I always strive to do more than the minimum, and we're going to be discussing that a little bit later too, the prerequisites, etc. So for now, I will end there.
All right, thank you. We have a question in the chat window. I heard DO schools like to see a physician's letter of rec. Does Touro University require a letter of rec from a physician?
Right now, no, because COVID made it really difficult for students or candidates to be able to shadow and get that exposure. We don't require it. If you have it, it does help a lot because it shows us that you do have exposure, but we require 2 letters from a physical science or a biological faculty member who has taught you, or one letter from a pre-professional advisory committee. So we don't require the DO letter, but it can help.
Yeah, that whole COVID thing really it made it difficult in a lot of different ways. But yeah, as some of you have spoken about, I do recommend the Health Scholar Program. I do recommend free clinics. I mean, there's a lot of ways to, get in there and really work with people. Yeah, it's like you show that you can be helpful in all kinds of ways, right? And that helps. All right. So well, you've sort of answered number 2. I'll ask number 2, but here's where I'm getting at in a second. What can applicants do to stand out in a medical school admissions process? Like, what makes that student shine? And all of you have talked about get hands-on experiences. I think that's clear. But I want to combine it with question number 3, which is, how important are extracurricular activities and volunteer work in the admissions process? And what type of activities are impressive, to the admission committees? And I have some questions to ask about that, but first I want to hear all your answers. So it's like, what makes them stand out? And, what are those activities that you go, that's interesting? So.
Okay, so it sounds like we're combining.
Yeah, we're doing a little combined there.
So I would first say, to help you stand out in the admissions process is be passionate or talk about something that makes you passionate. I think, the application gets you your interview. Your interview is so we can get to know you. So if you're telling us things you think we want to hear, it comes across that way, and you're not engaged in the conversation. You're not talking about things that have interested you, and I guess that would play into those extracurricular activities. So if you're passionate about helping the community, if you do a little league, or if you're a coach, or if you play the trumpet, we want to know all about it because it says such a big part of who you are. We want to get to know you, the kind of physician you want to be, and then also the things that you enjoy doing that move you or motivate you. I wouldn't say there are extracurricular activities that impress us more than others. I think it's more important to know who you are, to get a sense of who you are.
Ms. Fulbright, yeah.
Yes, I can go next. So as it relates to UCR, kind of what makes an applicant stand out, I think, in our admission cycle is an applicant's ability to align or showcase how their personal values align with the mission of UCR School of Medicine. So UCR has a unique mission to not only serve underserved communities, but specifically underserved communities found in the Inland Empire. So we're talking about Riverside County, San Bernardino County, and we also consider Imperial County, which is actually located in San Diego County, but it's close on the border of Mexico and the United States, has a large population of underserved people. So we consider that as well. So kind of as Dr. Cortez alluded to earlier, we really want to make sure that applicants are walking the walk and talking the talk. So what I mean by that is UCR has a focus specifically on serving or recruiting students to practice in primary care. So if you are interested in practicing in primary care, we want to make sure that your extracurriculars align with your interests that you've notated on your application to practice primary care. So we're looking to see if your clinical experience aligns with primary care. Have you done something in general OB, general family medicine, general peds, those sorts of things? Some of the gaps, and it's very relatively easy, I don't know for my other two colleagues, but to kind of pick up on the gaps or the inconsistencies in an application first. So for example, sometimes we'll see an applicant say, I absolutely want to be your primary care physician. And then you look at their extracurricular experiences and they're in ophthalmology, they are in orthopedic surgery, etc. So I think really kind of when you're thinking about developing your application, I really encourage applicants to take a look at the mission of the specific school that you're applying to and make sure that one, you have a general understanding of their mission, but two, ask yourself, how am I aligning my application with the mission specifically of that institution? Because we get thousands of applications. At UCR, we get about 6,000 applications for a total of 80 seats. So it's extremely, it's very competitive. So we are absolutely trying to recruit students who personally align with our mission. And then the last thing that I'll say in terms of just kind of reviewing applications and what makes an applicant stand out is their ability to kind of tell their story through their application. I think Crystal kind of alluded to this, you know, if you play the trumpet or the trombone or something like that, that's wonderful. And we want to hear about that. We're really trying to see, you know, one, can you relate to the community that we're trying to service? But two, you know, are you just a human being? You know, we get bright individuals all the time, high MCAT score, high GPA, but you know, at the end of the day, can you relate to the community that you're trying to service? So really just putting an effort, I think, to tell your story in your application, as opposed to kind of just trying to tell us what you think we want to hear, really sets an applicant apart and kind of makes them, I'd say, more competitive, I guess, at least in the eyes of the UCR admissions committee. So I'll go ahead and pause there.
Thank you. Dr. Cortez.
Yes, for us at CDU, everything that has been said already, we cannot stress that enough. And I'll start with the personal statement. This is our inaugural class. We received close to 1,000 applications for our inaugural class for 60 spots. We expect next year next cycle to get at least 4,000 applications for another 60 spots. So one of the things that I see recurrent in personal statements, for example, the student, something happens, an impactful experience that makes them realize I want to go into medicine. And then they talk about that experience, or more specifically, they'll talk about the person and involved in that experience. And then somehow they mention a little bit what they've done in terms of what experience, voluntary experience, work experience they have. And they end with, I'm really passionate about medicine. I want to make a difference. And I want to be the doctor that's going to change the world. A couple of things going through that personal statement. Who's applying to medical school? Is it your Uncle Joe, or is it you? Is it grandma? I love my parents, but they're not the ones applying, you are. So I think spending time in your personal statement and really being true to yourself. Why am I applying? Removing the what does the admissions committee wants to hear, and what should I write about? If you do that one thing of really focusing on yourself and what you bring to the table, not Uncle Joe, but you're already standing above 50 percentile of those that apply just by doing that one thing. Imagine how powerful that is. Who are you? I've reread personal statements many times, trying to find one or two things about that student, and that I found sometimes nothing aside from, yes, they did some community work, but I can replace that name with another name in the applicant pool and get the same results. So really spend time with that. And my respects to your Uncle Joe. I mean, I don't mean it to make that any lesser of a story, but always ask yourself, who's the one applying? And what do I want to show? You're already a star. I mean, you're applying and you made it this far. Tell us more about yourself. And then align it with, with the school. Sometimes we've been in the interview process, and we'll ask a student, what do you what is it about this, the CDU, mission that gravitates to you, and they were not even aware of the mission. So that's very important. And I've shared that with other, colleagues from other universities, and they encounter some of the same issues. So do your homework for a number of things, not only to get that interview, but you're also interviewing the university. Do you want to be in a place for 4 years where you hate every aspect of it? It has nothing to do with what you stand for, what your passion is. Or do you want to be in a place that's the best fit for you? Okay, so look at that. And I could parallel that with your letters of recommendation. Don't go with the most famous person in the US to write you a letter if they don't know you. The person that you least expect will have the most impact as a letter of recommender might be the person that gets you into medical school because of the quality of the letter. So really stay true to who you are. Tell us something unique about yourself. And also be careful with your passion. When you say, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to go in there and fix the system, guess who's reading your letters of recommendation? And guess who's reading your application? Guess who's reading that personal statement? Who's reading that statement? Physicians, surgeons, family doctors who are have made a big dent already, or maybe not, but you're telling them basically that they haven't done anything until you come, you're the superhuman that's going to come and change the world. Pay attention to that. And that is very common. Very common. Wow. And many students feel that they can end their essay very strong by saying that. So be careful with that. Be a little bit humble with that without sacrificing your attributes. And your attributes will come through if you spend your time in your personal statement. And really, I cannot emphasize that enough. This happened, and I'm going to change it and transform not only the U.S. but globally. But okay, tell us how you're going to do that without saying that in that context, because there's a lot of people already doing that. So your experience, I mentioned earlier, EMT. It's a good one for us because you get to work with ER medicine. And you get so much hands-on experience. That's just one example of the different things that you can do. But it's for your own interest too. When you're looking at what are the requirements, what are the expectations, ask yourself why those are in place in the first place. It's for you to get experience. And some students walk out of there saying, oh my goodness, this is my calling. This is what I want to do. And there's others that are like, well, I'm interested in medicine, but maybe I'll do the research aspect of it. Maybe not an MD. Maybe I'll go for my PhD instead. So it's also for you. It's not the schools imposing this on you necessarily. It's an opportunity for you to discover whether or not this is what you want to do. And let me tell you, we're going to cover probably not only financial aid, but the cost of attending. For us, is $69,000 a year. Times 4, that's a lot of money. That's more than $250,000. So that's your investment. And guess what? Many medical schools do not provide fully financial packages or even partially. So it's also your investment. So we want to make sure, as we're looking at your application, and as much as we like being the good one saying, oh, we're giving you an entry, you've earned an interview, or the acceptance, as much as satisfying as that is when I'm on the phone with students or emailing them, congratulations, there's also that responsibility of making sure that this is what you want to do, because you're going to walk out with a substantial amount of loans that if you're, if you succeed and complete your MD, yes, in a few years through loan forgiveness or through your earnings, you'll be able to pay that back. But what if you realize, oh, this was not for me, and a year or two you decide to leave? It's gonna be a financial hardship for you too. So there's so many things to take into account, and that's something that we don't control. You control that as a student in terms of doing your homework and finding out what's the best fit for you.
I've got a question. So I really like what you said, Dr. Cortez, about do your homework. But what many of the students do is they use a I call it the CAS system, but there's many names for them. So they're writing one personal statement that'll get sent out to all these different schools. And yet, like I'm hearing you say, Ms. Fulbright, or you, Dr. Cortez, okay, you got to consider our mission and what our medical school is focused on. And yet they're using a general system to apply to all the schools. And so do you think it's wiser to not do that, to use a general system? Do you think it's okay, I need to write a letter that addresses what's going on at UC Riverside, for example, and how I am willing, do you see what I'm asking? I'm sorry, I may not be clear.
That's so, and thank you for asking. No, you are very clear, and thank you for asking that. It's such an important question. We have the secondary application that all of us have mentioned this morning. For us at CDU, the secondary application this year was given automatically to all students who applied because we got partially credentialed in November. So we've done in a few months what we have usually a whole year to do. So for all of our applicants, in our case, we automatically send them a secondary this time around. And in that secondary, there were very specific questions that where the students can tell us about what is it about, and the questions were very specific in some cases. What is it about our mission statement? What is it about our vision? What is it about our specific program that gravitates you to it, et cetera. So a lot of that will come in the secondary in the secondary application, at least for our campus.
Got it. Ms. Fulbright, is there anything you want to address about that?
No.
Okay.
I think Dr. Cortez captured it. We also have a secondary application.
And one of the things that I tell the students when they're applying to med school, and I read personal statements and whatnot, and I agree with Dr. Cortez on some of those statements. What I'm looking for in the personal statement is, you've had all these experiences, you're the EMT, you've been the scribe, whatever. What was the events that touched you, made your soul flare and go, I want to be a doctor? What was it that impacted you personally? And that fueled your passion so that you want to be part of the world and want to be of service to the world. And you may not be the best in the world. As Dr. Cortez was saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the best. Yay, go you. But what's really important is, where was that passion? Where was that one event where you went, this is it, man. I know I could be a good doctor and this is what I want. And can you express that in your letter? And then the other thing about getting your letter of rec, it's so true. When you ask for a letter of rec, I tell my students to ask 2 questions. Will you please write me a letter of rec? And will you write me a really good one? And that second question is hard because you're sort of implying, hey, will you write me a really good one? But not everybody will. You need to be careful with that. Right. So, I always, I always, really interview the student really well before I write them a letter of rec. So I can talk about what they were like in my classroom. And then I write about what their life experiences were that helped convince me, yeah, you're ready for medical school.
Can I add something really
Sure,
quickly to that?
sure, of course, of course.
You brought a really excellent point. Part of doing the homework, which is kind of a generic category, part of doing the homework when asking for letters of recommendation, something that I have students before that, when they ask me for a letter, I give them a sheet, which is basically what you do with your interview. And the sheet is, how did we meet? If it was a course you took or a particular organization that we were involved in together, what are the attributes that you feel I can speak on your behalf? That why did you think of me as your recommender? What are you applying for, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, what do you do with them in your interview? What students can also do, what you can do, students, is as you're thinking of who to ask for letters of recommendation, prepare that for them. I borrow that from my own advisor in my PhD program, who I spend about 18 hours a day with for most of my time. We did radio shows, the research, publications together, and she still demanded that every single time I asked for a letter of recommendation. And she goes, that's a way of being respectful also of the recommenders and their time. And believe it or not, but by asking them if they can write a strong letter, they will be honest with you for the most part. They will tell you. I've declined writing letters sometimes because I'll tell a student, I don't know you that well, and my letter might even hinder you because I cannot speak to all the greatness that maybe somebody else can. But even by asking, and my kids would have noticed, even by asking that of students, the sheet that I send them, like, okay, can you fill this out for me before I can write your letter? A number of them will not return it, and that's the first. It has to be 50-50, for example, you with the interview. So I don't do it to not write letters. It just that takes some time from their end too, and I know that will be a stronger letter if we have that. So.
There's a couple questions there in the chat, and one of them is, hey, how early should we ask for letters of rec? You ask for it, at the end of the semester. Say, I'll get kids saying, hey, Dr. D, will you write me a letter when I'm ready to apply for nursing school, whatever? And I'm like, sure, let's keep in touch. And that helps. Are they keeping in touch? So I know what their experiences are. And then eventually I can write them the letter, right? So that's no big deal. Here's one. If there's such a high demand for health professionals, why is it so expensive? Any comments on that? I think it's a business, and the business has to make money. And that's part of it. And it's expensive to run medical school classes and stuff. I think that would be my answer to you. But I agree, it's a good, challenging question. And then what if you want the profession for non-inspiring reasons or non-clinical? Also, doesn't the fact that you're in a clinical setting allude to that you're already having an interest in medicine? So wouldn't some story about some interesting medicine seem forced? No, I don't think so. I want to know what experience you had that moved you. It's not forced. You're just telling me about what made it work for you. Can we include any letter of recommendation from college professors, or does it have to be the professors from the university we are attending?
It doesn't have to be. No,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, it doesn't have to be. Right.
It doesn't have to be. Yeah.
Let's go to question number 4 on my list. How do you ensure that the medical school admissions process is fair and equitable for all applicants, regardless of their backgrounds or circumstances? How do you guys deal with that?
Well, at Touro, we have a non-discriminatory ethics, so we treat all of our applicants fairly. For applicants who may have certain circumstances, maybe they're on the lower end of poor, they didn't quite reach the admissions committee bar. We also have our EAM-based review, which is a secondary look at applications, and we look at their experiences, their attributes, and their metrics. So their experiences are the exposure, you know, their volunteer work, what they've done. Attributes is their background, you know, who they are, and then of course their metrics. And we look at the lower end of applicants, and sometimes we're able to interview maybe 30 to 50 people who may not have qualified for the interview prior before taking that secondary look. So we do try to give our lower end of applicants a chance to get that interview. So we will do the secondary look, our EAM based review.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say at UCR, there's two major things that we focus on to ensure that our process is fair and equitable. I'd say the first thing that we make sure that we implement is standardization. So each applicant is evaluated on a standard rubric to make sure that we're evaluating all applicants equitably. And similar to kind of what Crystal alluded to, we do have a separate department on diversity and equity to help support us in this process. And then I'd say another thing that we pride ourselves on at UCR as it relates to our admissions process is diversity. So making sure that all parties involved with the admissions process are diverse. So at UCR, we have faculty participating in the review process, we have staff participating in the review process, and we actually have volunteer community members as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, participating in our admissions process. They typically interview our applicants, so they participate at that stage of the process. And each participant who's involved with our admissions evaluation process, they go through a standardized training, which also includes a bias training. We all have biases, and so just making sure that we are aware of those biases and doing our best to kind of mitigate those. So I would say that's kind of how UCR at least tries to or makes a concerted effort to make sure that our process is fair and equitable. And then probably the last thing too, I should mention, laws. We have quite a bit of laws here in the state of California surrounding just our admissions process in general. Prop 209 kind of comes to mind, which explicitly states for at least public institutions that we are not allowed to make admissions decisions based off of race, ethnicity, sex, gender, those sorts of things. So I would say all of those things kind of combined contribute to making our admissions process as fair and equitable as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, and I echo everything that has been said already. We're inclusive in terms of having different, everyone from physicians to current faculty to medical students from other programs participate at different stages. With medical students, it would be we had them this year interviewing some of our students as well. So yes, it's a whole committee, and it's different entities that form part of the entire process. And as my colleagues mentioned too, we do the MCAT score might be low, where traditionally maybe the student would not be looked at, but we look at other things, or maybe the MCAT score is high, but it doesn't match the science GPA. So we work and make every effort to increase the equity and medical school in terms of who's in medical school. And and what do we need in our communities, our different communities across the country in terms of representation and in different ways. So we do make a huge effort to do that. And as I mentioned, we went through our first cycle, and we're going to continue to do that moving forward.
There's been a lot of chatter in the. Here's a very, very specific question. Should we take calculus-based physics or algebra trig-based physics? Mostly speaking to Touro University, but any of you can answer. So there's been all this chatter about the calculus. What calculus would you like, Touro University, Ms. Nunez?
You know, I saw that chat and I was thinking, maybe I should just give them my email because it's a very specific question. It sounds like they're really worried about the math requirement. I mean, generally speaking, if you get your bachelor's, we'll be able to find something in your transcript, the way COMAS generates your transcript. We will find something to meet that requirement. But if you're really concerned about it, I would recommend attending a Touro talk. It's our weekly info sessions that are informal QAs. And we usually have a faculty member, our senior admissions coordinator, who might shed some light. But generally speaking, if you get your bachelor's, we'll find somewhere in your transcript to meet that requirement. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but for more peace of mind, I would definitely check it out. It's on our website. And I don't know if they have our email address, I can always put that in the chat as well.
That's your choice if you want to do that.
Okay,
That's
we
don't hand that out. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's one. I'm an advisor. So this is one of our career counselors at Mesa Community College. I often get students who already have a degree and are working in a different career. Now that they want to become a doctor, they need to take prereqs. Should these students just take the basic 100 and 200 level prereqs, or should I also tell them to take a few upper division sciences at a university as well? For example, upper division like genetics, biochemistry, histology, molecular biology, to name a few. So what would you recommend?
I'll start with that one. Given for us, the prereqs we weigh very, very highly this year, especially because we'll take a look at students whose maybe science GPA is not where we would, start with the GPA or the MCAT score. So prereqs are so important to us, and there's mandatory prerequisites that we look at. And to answer that question, for the sciences, all the general ones, general biology, general chem, OChem, physics with lab, all the introductory courses in those are prerequisites. Biochemistry as a prerequisite. Calculus, it doesn't matter what calculus you take, but one semester or quarter of calculus. English is also a prerequisite, a full year of English. And all of these are 1 year with the exception of biochem and calculus, which is what we call 6 months, but that's really a year is 2 courses, 6 months is 1 course, whether you're in the quarter or semester system. And those for us, students would mention, would call me and say, you're the only one that's requiring that. I was admitted somewhere else where they didn't require the prerequisites. I'm like, they didn't, but they looked at other factors that maybe we were a little bit more flexible with. But so for us specifically, the prereqs are so important because that's the baseline for our students to be successful. And there's also recommended courses. So again, to answer the question, yes, take all the basic courses, and if you can, take some of the advanced courses as well. For us, also because of the pandemic, we do accept online coursework, especially during that period, except the lab work that does need to be in person. And of course, I told students, do more than the minimum. In some cases, maybe they got a C in one of them and an A plus in another one. And because they took extra, they were able to interchange those for their benefit. And English, just because students, there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of writing, and students need to be able to do that, to perform well on that, especially during the first year in medical school. So for us, yes, prerequisites weigh heavily. You have to have the prerequisites.
One of the questions, and I want to continue on with that, is if you take most of your pre-med classes in a community college, does that hurt your application? or not at all? How do you guys view that? Because we get a lot of kids, say from UCI over here at IVC, that were like psych majors there, and now are taking all their pre-med classes here. And we always get them to go into med school. We're good, but I'm just curious, like, how do you really feel about that?
For Touro, we don't judge separately, but we do judge equally. So we're all still holding you accountable to the same bar that we're all trying when we are looking at your metric and we're looking at your application. So we don't judge you any differently if that's the courses you've taken.
Yeah, and I would say at UCR, we love community college students or students who have transferred from a community college. I think it's a great way in terms of recruitment to diversify our class. I think a lot of students who attend community colleges come from diverse backgrounds. With that being said, I know there is kind of some sort of stigma per se, like, oh, if you went to class or took coursework at a community college, it weighs less than taking coursework at a four-year institution. So I just want everybody, I think, on this call to kind of be mindful of that, because I think the answer to that question depends on the institution, the individual institution themselves. But yeah, we love community college students at UCR. And I think another important factor to kind of consider is, why a student has made the decision to take coursework at a community college. Oftentimes, there may be financial barriers to a student being able to take that coursework at a four-year institution. And so we don't want to penalize anybody for not having the resources to be able to get certain coursework. So at UCR, at least, we love community college students. We welcome them.
And we do too. And we want to be doing more outreach with you at the city college level. And we're committed to that. So in terms of the prerequisites, whether you took it at UCLA, at UC Irvine, or at your community college, or some at different, we have students who went to 2 or 3 different city colleges, depending. They started in high school. As you know, you can start your junior year in high school taking coursework. And maybe when they went to get their undergrad in a different state, they went to a different, city college, and they took more courses there. That is very common, and it's a very smart way also to save money, or to not, for different reasons. There's different reasons for that. But yes, we look at those equally at CDU. And as I mentioned, we want to do more outreach to the community colleges, and we welcome students from there. And we, you still have to have your BA or BS from a 4-year, but your prerequisites, hey, they are welcome. And so you either can supplement them or complete them all at the city college level. For us, we're looking at completion, if you haven't completed that, and especially if you've done more than the minimum requirement. And look at our websites at each. I can speak for my colleagues too. I think our websites are full of information, a listing of the prerequisites, and all the other information you need. That's a good place to start.
One of the things that I warn students about too is, okay, what the colleges want to see is make sure that you are taking a full load and getting an A in all those classes, that you can take a full load and succeed with a full load of classes. And so that's one piece. But what do you, I was curious of how you guys view a student that maybe can't take a full load because they're working, they have a family, and they're taking community college classes. Is that just part of your diversity of, like, we take that into consideration kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think students who fall under those circumstances, it really, if they complete the coursework at the community college or wherever they have the opportunity to do so, it really shows kind of the resiliency, I think, with that specific applicant, which are all great qualities to have in somebody who's trying to pursue a career in medicine. So yeah, I think if the opportunity presents for a student to take coursework at a four-year institution, I would recommend that option. But we also recognize that not everybody has the same opportunities to pursue education. And so if pursuing coursework at a community college is the only option, by all means, take advantage of that.
Okay. Well, we're now at 12 o'clock. And so thank you everybody for showing up. And thank you to Ms. Nunez, Ms. Fulbright, Dr. Cortez. I really appreciate you guys taking some of your valuable time. So you heard everybody what you got to do. Look at the school you're applying to. Consider their mission, their point of view of the world. Does that meet your soul, meet your passions, right? Make the letter truth to your experiences. Try and get as many hands-on clinical experiences as you can. That will make you a stronger candidate. And of course, it helps if you can do well on your courses and your MCAT. There's your big summary.
Beautiful.
All right. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And thank you, panelists. All right.
Thank
See
you.
you.